Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all.
Good morning, Secretary.
I love this room full of women.
We do too. We do too. Thank you, Secretary, for being here today. Many of the people are very familiar with your bio, but it truly is an extraordinary journey and an extraordinary example of leadership potential and a mission to serving the lives of others. You are one of the most influential women in Washington, and the Secretary has
something. You don't feel it. People say that all the time. I don't feel it. So we can talk more about that.
I want to talk about that. Well,
yeah.
well, we feel it. We feel it. So at least you have 300 women feeling it with you. But I think that is an interesting thread to this conversation around the leadership role that you serve. And you have such a distinguished and diverse career that has spanned the public and private sectors, the nonprofit sectors as well. And your extensive career in public service has included top positions in each of the past 3 Republican administrations. The Secretary served as George W. Bush's Labor Secretary for 2 terms, the longest-serving member of his cabinet. She was the first female Asian American in any presidential cabinet in U.S. history, which is one of the many firsts that you represented. And truly one of the many firsts and one of the many barriers that you've broken. Prior to this, the Secretary served as the director of the Peace Corps as well as the president and CEO of the United Way. Since becoming the 18th Secretary of Transportation, Secretary Chao is bringing her leadership skills to bear in new dimensions. And at a critical time in this country, she's been tackling an extraordinary set of issues and opportunities to leverage innovation and technology within her realm to ensure our nation's competitive edge and our opportunity to continue to rise and thrive on the global stage. So this morning, we're going to talk about the Secretary's extraordinary rise to the work that she's doing now. Literally, there's very few people whose bios are as impressive as yours. Your rise to one of the most powerful women in Washington, even if you may not feel that way. We'll also be talking about some of the unique dynamics that women face in politics today, particularly having broken so many barriers, and also the work that you do and how you drive change in Washington, particularly in this environment. So, Secretary, I want to rewind the clock a little bit. Rewind the clock a little bit. I often talk to leaders who have accomplished great success, and there are threads of what have defined the character that's been formative to that success within their childhood. So I would love for you to rewind back and talk a little bit about the childhood influences that were formative for you. You've talked so much about your parents. What were some of those defining
have
moments?
A lot in common.
Do we?
Yes.
Oh yeah, we do. We have
no.
We have lots of sisters. That is.
So we are daughters. We're the number 1 daughters. That makes a big difference. Mm-hmm. So Maura is the first of 5 daughters. I am the first of 6 daughters. Mm-hmm. So I grew up in a household of women.
I guess we learned negotiating and
well, the funniest thing is my sisters say that I'm really bossy. I don't think I'm bossy. I'm just trying to take care of them.
I'm not bossy. I just know I know the better way.
Know it all.
I just
know what's the best way forward.
I'm just offering them. I'm helping them out. I'm being generous.
So you ask about
but talk about those defining moments within your childhood, because you've reflected back around these formative experiences. Obviously, one of 6 daughters, that you took on leadership roles, and the values that were very important to your parents that were instilled in you.
My parents are incredibly inspiring. They believed in giving back to the community. They believed in working for something bigger than yourself. So, and they were very active in their community, and they were very hardworking to build a better life for my sisters and me. So we learned a lot about hard work, about persistence, about determination, about how to surmount adversities and how to have hope and maintain optimism. They believe very much in the opportunities of this country. And even though they could not envision what opportunities would be available to their daughters, they had absolute confidence that this country offered so many opportunities, and they wanted their daughters to be able to take advantage of them. And so they explored us, they implored us, encouraged us to explore in a responsible way. They cultivated a great sense of curiosity and a great sense of adventure that of our small little community, Asian Americans, of course, that we would have the courage to go outside our community into mainstream America and try to make our way. And because they are such optimistic and hopeful people, their attitude infused our attitude and gave us a lot of positive vibes about going out and trying different things. And again, they were not people who thought about making. They're very successful, but my mother passed away about 10 years ago. But they always thought, you have to build something. You have to think about something. You have to work towards something that's bigger than yourself. Because if you only think about your own advancement, your own success, you run out of fuel pretty quickly. Because we're only sustained by one person, us. But if we believe in something bigger than ourselves, whether it's contributing to society in some form, whether it's working for a larger goal to help other people, that kind of motivation is self-sustaining, and ultimately it helps you endure and foster stamina. So they've always said, believe in something bigger than yourself, work towards something bigger than yourself. So in my own career, I've had an incredible array of different careers. When Maura read my resume, one reason it's so long is because I'm so much older now, number one.
That was the abbreviated version. It's truly impressive.
And then secondly, I was thinking to myself, this group is gonna think I can't hold a job. But by having all these different jobs, I learned so much about different sectors of our economy, different people, different communities, and I think ultimately that made me a better leader.
You have broken barriers, and you've talked about working toward a higher purpose, and you've done this in so many ways. But where do you think, you talk about your parents' influence, this ambition and drive, has it always been cemented into who you are and what you work toward?
Oh, heavens, no. I'm actually quite lazy. And I'm actually quite shy. So it was only through the encouragement of my parents. Okay, opens up another big topic. People are always talking about mentors. I didn't have any mentors because we grew up so constricted in our own little community that we just didn't know very many people. I came from a very humble, modest background. And when we were growing up, nobody paid us attention because they didn't think we were worth paying attention to. We had nobody.
Did you feel you were worth paying attention to?
I don't know whether I felt I was worthy, that I was worth being paid attention to, but I was always, it doesn't matter what other people think about you, okay? It's what's most important, what you think about yourself. So I always thought, I have a wonderful family. I was very much buoyed by my family. And my parents told the daughters, all of us, that we can do anything we wanted in this world if we were willing to work hard and sacrifice. Because hard work and reaching certain goals do require sacrifices. So we were just imbued with that empowering philosophy that our destiny was within our own control, that if we worked hard, that if we had goals, and they did not need to be big goals. In fact, they were modest goals that we knew that we could meet, but you have a succession of goals. And so armed with, parents who were so empowering, each one of us have found our voice, found our place in America, and my sisters are all doing really well. I'm really, really proud of them. And not only are they successful, they're really nice people. You would love to meet them. Seriously, they're nice people that you will want to spend time with. So I'm really proud of them. And they all are very active in philanthropy. We've been very fortunate. And each of my sisters have their own foundations and their own philanthropic activities, and we're all very active volunteers.
So next year we can have our sisters just take up one of these tables, and it'll be, our two sets of families. Who knows what they'll say about us, though, or at least mine. You've talked about always working toward this higher purpose and doing it in a variety of different sectors. But when someone looks at someone as successful as you, and you mentioned, earlier sort of this, and I want to talk about that dimension of whether you feel as one of the most powerful women in Washington, but there's no smooth ascendancy to the top. You've taken a lot of what I would say zigzags in your career, taken risks and taken advantage of opportunities. And you've also said there's no such thing as an overnight success. When you look back at your career, when did you feel like you were most stretched? And were there moments and setbacks that are inevitable in one's career that have been formative in defining the opportunities and the work that you're doing today?
America's a wonderful country. It's very forgiving. It's very tolerant. So we all make mistakes, and no mistake is really fatal. There are always opportunities for second chances. And as much as I didn't like it at the time when I was going through difficulties, the times that I have learned the most, the times that I have grown the most, are the times when I've had the most difficulties and the greatest pressures.
What was one of those moments that's sort of blistering that just at the time stung in a way that still feels present?
There were times when people were not very nice because I didn't come from privilege or wealth, and people didn't think I was important. This is a very subtle influence that sometimes we may not realize. But if you really come from where I did and you didn't really know anybody, people can be quite mean. And I just didn't get discouraged by it. I knew that I was going to be having an exciting, interesting life, and so what if someone was mean to me? It wasn't as if I was magnanimous. I just didn't care. That's what they thought of me, big deal. I'm gonna go on to do such interesting things, and I'll put up with this for a little while, and I'll try to learn from it, find out why that person doesn't like me. But sometimes people just are mean, and you shouldn't take it personally. You should always have the center. Know what you are worth. And this is in personal relationships as well. I tell a lot of young women this. When they're in relationships that are uneven, unequal, know your worth. You deserve a certain kind of treatment. You value yourself, and you deserve better. And so there are some people, in a personal relationship, get out of it. But in a job, you may not be able to. And then you learn and you prepare for the future, and you hopefully take those bad experiences, turn them into good ones by learning from them, by vowing to yourself that if you were ever in the same situation, You would never do that to another person. So I think I've learned so much about leadership from good and bad bosses. And leadership is not something that you're born with. I'm a firm believer that you can learn to be a better leader. And one of the ways that I encourage people to learn leadership skills is to do volunteer work. Be a volunteer, join a board or something, and you learn all about leadership styles and how to be a leader. And you can assume some of those leadership positions yourself. And then if you mess up, not that you ever want to, but if you mess up, you're a volunteer. What are they going to do? Fire you? So you have to have a sense of humor, do your best, believe in yourself, not overweening pride. I'm not saying that. Have a realistic assessment as to who you are, what you're good at, what you're not good at. What do you have to shore up of yourself if you want to get to a certain place? I mean, if you're not good at math, you're not going to be a mathematician. So forget it. Move on. Do something else, And this is where I think your circle of friends and also your loved ones are very helpful. I was just in the back room talking with a wonderful artist, and she says she has 2 sisters. She's one of 3, and her sisters tell her the truth, and that's important. We all need somebody to tell us what we're good at, what we're not. And I'm not talking about someone who kind of like tears you down, but just is honest. So there's so many wonderful things about, life, and as I grow older, I appreciate it more and more. So Maura and I talked about this. Success, you asked? What's success? I think when I was younger, my definition was very narrow, so much more narrow and modest than you would imagine. When I graduated from college, I deemed success as getting a job, getting my own apartment, so that I wouldn't have to go back home and live with my family. So my definition of success have changed. I've always appreciated the value of relationships, though. And I think as we get older, we appreciate that true success is the respect and love of your peers and your loved ones in your family and friends. And that true success is not so much your resume, but what have you done to help people that are in your community, in your life? What have you contributed to society? Those are the real treasures of life.
And before we talk a little bit about the work that you're doing right now in your current role, you talk about the need for hard work, and you mentioned sort of there are trade-offs, and that our lives are very demanding, and we have to make sacrifices in order to be able to fulfill on our goals and ambitions and our higher purpose. When you think about your life, how did you think about those dimensions? Were there trade-offs or sacrifices that you had to make that when you look at young women today, you would help frame differently?
There are always sacrifices, and there are always trade-offs. I am married to a wonderful man. I love him dearly. He is my low-maintenance husband. He does his own laundry. He cooks, I know. And he's just a really considerate person to live with. But on the other hand, I haven't had children because I didn't get married until I was 39 years old. And, when I'm a generation older than most of you, we were taught when we were working, because we're kind of like the second generation of women who were working, that it was, that it was okay to start late and that you can have it all. Well, it turns out that you can't, that your biological clock sometimes works against you. So I think it's important, whatever choices that you make, that you know the trade-offs when you're making them. I think the worst thing is if these sacrifices occurred and you didn't know that you had made those sacrifices and those choices were beyond you. So I'm all for empowerment, for knowing oneself, and for making choices yourself and not having choices being foisted upon you.
So I want to shift gears to the work that you're doing now. As I said, you've worked across many different administrations, and you've worked somewhat as an entrepreneur in government, which can be a challenge, right? Trying to drive change at the pace that you would like. Sometimes Washington is known to be bureaucratic and slow-moving and the like. But you are very energetic and focused now on the intersection of technology and innovation within our transportation ecosystem. Talk a little bit about why this is so important to our country's future and the changes that you feel are critical to be driving that we may not be able to appreciate in connection to our global competitiveness.
Well, you may not know that the Transportation Department actually regulates self-driving cars, automated driving systems, certain aspects about space travel. Isn't that interesting? And also drones. So self-driving cars offer great benefits. For example, 94% of accidents occur because of human error. If we're able to help human beings have control over the vehicle, we can actually make driving safer. And then think about the people with disabilities or the elderly, many who cannot drive. If you had an automated driving system, self-driving car, they will reclaim their freedom. Isn't that wonderful? But as we have also seen, there are aspects of this emerging technology that still need more work. And so we have a legitimate concern about safety, privacy, and security. Because if any of these self-driving cars were hacked, they basically would be weaponized. So we as regulators have a very important role to play in regulating these new emerging technologies to address legitimate public issues about safety, security, and privacy while not hampering innovation and the creativity that is so much a part of America's competitiveness and tradition.
So as we wrap up, I want to touch briefly on two aspects of politics and policy, because I think there's a lot of engagement around how women can be more involved. But I first want to ask, no matter what side of the aisle you are on, I think we would all agree we are living in a very polarized environment, and one where there is a lot of noise and some frustration that there isn't the same desire to partner and build bridges and negotiate for the future. Again, having worked across so many administrations, this is not necessarily a new dynamic. How do we begin to build those bridges and be able to move forward at the pace we need around some of the initiatives that you talked about?
Well, number one, I try always to work on a bipartisan basis. But I think history is very, very helpful. We are a robust, dynamic, young country, and we are a democracy. So these members of Congress are not arguing for argument's sake. They give voice to people they represent. And we have a very cacophonous, diverse country. And the East and the West Coast are different. And Middle America is different from the East and the West Coast. And what we're seeing is this cacophony of voices that make up democracy. History is important, as I said, because if you look at our history and read our founding fathers' activities and their writings, they were tough on each other. One accused the other of having illegitimate child. Another one almost another one challenged one to a duel, almost, and killed him. And if you go in the Senate floor, you will see the Senate desk, one in particular, in which there is a sword mark, where somebody rushed on the Senate floor in the 1800s, took a sword and stuck it. Fortunately, not at a person, but at a desk.
So these are mild times by comparison, right? I mean,
So we have now 24/7 media, and we now see so much more. But our country has always been ruckus and confrontational and loud. And this is how we resolve issues and build consensus. And I'm always committed to working on a bipartisan basis. But this is the way in which this robust democracy works.
as we wrap up, one very last question for you. We've talked about the anemic number of women in political positions today. While there may be record, women running for office, there's still a huge gap. If this conference is really, looking to inspire new ways to take action. Not everyone's going to run for office. Not everyone is going to, have a role in Washington in the type of role that you had, or even in their local community. If you were to give the women in this room and me as well, one piece of advice around how we can get more involved in policy and politics in a way that will hopefully close that gender imbalance, what would that be?
Number one, I think if you're really interested, you just need to read the newspapers and go on the media, the radio, talk radio, and then you also have the websites. Second of all, I think, politics, I talk specifically about politics. Politics is hard. I'm not in politics. I'm in public service. You're supposed to laugh at that. I think it's hard for women to run a lot of times because I think it's very confrontational, and you have to raise money because money allows you to amplify your voice. But for those that are not entering the ring, I think you can keep up with what is happening, go on the websites, keep up with the news, support candidates, you can volunteer, and then also just talk to people who you think are interesting. Don't ever be afraid. So I think my parting words, you didn't ask this, but I used to be so afraid of so many things. I was so afraid. And I think if anything at this age, I'm no longer afraid. And I encourage young women to not be afraid, to believe in themselves, know who you are, have a center, treasure yourself, and then go out and explore and learn. We live in a wonderful world.
Well, Secretary, thank you so much for joining us here today. We really appreciate you kicking off the summit, and it's been a lovely conversation, so thank you.